Money, where art thou? Can't you see? I need you now. Money, gone away, out of sight. As they say, nobody needs you when you are gone. Nobody know you when you are around. When you are rich, you do as you want to do. When you fall, and you're better than you. That's why I want more money, plenty money.
Yes, indeed, and that is what we are talking inside of here. More money, plenty money, any money that is good for we. People, welcome to Every Cent Counts right here on New Era TT Radio. And of course, it's a Monday, and when we are here on a Monday, it's always a great time with Garth Thomas. So, Mr. Thomas, a great Monday morning to you.
And a great Monday morning to you, Sir Charles, and to all our listeners and viewers. You know, I have to remember that this is a new era. This is not. This is not the old. This is not the old era. This is the new era. TT Radio. Love the title. Continue to love the title. Well, Sir Charles, we continue our conversations this morning, and I am delighted to welcome to our platform, our studio. I'm not too sure what is the correct name to call it, but we are having with us, I'm delighted to have with us a fellow Toastmaster. Her name is Cecile George. And I neglected to ask her to send me a little intro. So what I am going to do is put her on the spot because she is a Toastmaster. And in Toastmasters, you know, we have a section of our program, of our meeting that we call Table Topics. And in Table Topics, you know, the Table Topic Master will ask a question and then identify somebody to give a quick 2-minute response. So, Cecile accustomed to this kind of a thing. So, Cecile, I know you wasn't planning but Table Topics this morning, but pow, look at it in your idea. All right. So, Cecile, tell us something about yourself.
Well, it's always good to get practice for Toastmasters. Are you hearing me all right?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, as good Mr. Thomas said, my name is Cecile George. I am a fairly recent returnee to Trinidad and Tobago. I came back in 2015 after having been gone since the late 80s, and I joined Toastmasters in 2020. I am a screenwriter. I write for the movies. I am currently shopping my own feature film, trying to raise funds for it to get it produced hopefully next year. And my work tends to be, because I am very interested in history, culture, and heritage and the arts, my work tends to lean very heavily into local folklore, culture, cultural specifics, and use of history, because I think that one of the issues that we have as a nation is that we don't value our own history and heritage and culture enough. We are busy importing stuff from elsewhere. And that has unfortunately not made us a cohesive country in, say, the way Jamaica or Barbados are. And which is unfortunate because we have an incredible culture and history and heritage that could actually be making us, I believe, an awful lot of money if we market it correctly. So that is what my purpose, intent, and focus is these days.
Well, that is why you're on the program this morning, Cecile, because I have made a pledge to provoke, to whatever extent I can, as many conversations around Trinbago, its history, its true history, all right, its culture and the heritage element in all of this, because when you do not value the past, it makes it very difficult to move ahead into the future.
Correct.
And I really want to get a lot of conversations. Now, I am not talking about, I'm talking about all kinds of conversations, especially at what we would call the grassroots level. If you organize a town meeting, for argument's sake, at a community hall, at a community center, because we have community centers all over the country, and people come to that town hall meeting for the purpose of discussing how can we move Trinidad and Tobago forward into the future. I am not too sure if that is a very effective mechanism, because what tends to happen in those situations is that a few people tend to really dominate the conversation. And a lot of people with great ideas and who may be a little shy of public speaking, they may not all be Toastmasters. So they may be a little shy of public speaking, and therefore their ideas never see the light of day. And we are the poorer as a result. So I really want to provoke conversations all across the nation. I want to provoke conversations down on the block, by the rum shop, by, on the beach, by the river Lime, wherever people naturally congregate, where they're not coming to a meeting to discuss. It's just that they are in the normal spaces that they occupy, but I want to help them. I want to provoke people that when they're in those spaces, that they should talk about our history. I think, I keep remembering a history book that we had back in my primary school days. That was a long time ago. I think it was Black's History. You know about Black's History of Trinidad and Tobago?
I think I came up with West Indian Reader and whatever else that we then did.
Yeah, there was West Indian Reader. We had a West Indian Reader, we had a Royal Reader, and there was this, I'm pretty certain it was Black's History of Trinidad and Tobago. Anyhow, we wouldn't make an issue of that. The point is that the history that our educational system continues to promote is not our real history. It is the history of the conqueror. It is the history of the colonial powers that dominated us. It is not a complete, by any means, a complete history of who we are as a people. All right? I'm pretty certain, if I remember correctly, that Black's History, I think it was Black's History, that history book didn't talk anything about the first people, And that history talked about the Santa Maria, the Nina, and the Pinta. Now, I'm provoking you deliberately,
Well,
Right.
I mean, that is exactly part of our problem. We don't really know our history. I was startled to find that we don't seem to really be teaching it in primary school anymore, even under the guise of social studies. So we really don't have that collective mindset anymore, even if the history that we did learn was the foreigners' version of it. Speaking of the first peoples, yes, we had, I don't know if you were at the meeting that was held, was it last year or a year before, at, I think it was Central Bank Auditorium, or one of the auditoriums downtown, where they were discussing changing out the statues and what to do with the Columbus statue and these sorts of things. All of these legacy issues that we have in terms of monuments. And it was very telling that a lot of people were very insistent that if you remove these things, you are somehow destroying history. And my first response was, well, A, we're not teaching the history that is there anyway, because I'm pretty sure that a whole bunch of people could pass Columbus statue and not know who the heck it is to begin with. And secondly, the fact that you and I are here is proof that the history happened. So there is no eradicating of it. What I would say is the better word is proper contextualizing of the thing. So
I didn't get that word. Cecile.
Contextualizing of it.
Contextualizing. Okay.
Yeah. So the purpose of something like a statue or a monument is to celebrate the achievements of XYZ person, be it Columbus, be it Derek Williams, be it Sparrow. Whoever. If it is known that this person, whatever they did, and again, people are mixed. You do good things and you do bad things. That's human nature. But in terms of historical recognition, if it is known that this person was responsible in large part for the decimation of a culture, bad treatment of his own people, which, for example, Columbus was actually arrested for and taken back to Spain in chains because he treated his own people, the people he brought to Hispaniola, so badly that they rebelled against him. And he was actually clapped at irons and taken back. I think it was after the third voyage or so, taken back to Spain and put in jail. And he was stripped of many of his titles, and his descendants weren't allowed to inherit the titles as they normally would have. The argument is that, well, it's part of our history, so we shouldn't do anything with the statue. Okay. But why are we celebrating this person who has been such a detriment to the first peoples who you mentioned, to the enslaved Africans who came afterwards, and a general mindset that our culture and history did not begin until the European conquest and invasion. And that, to me, is where we have to start correcting the deficiencies. The first peoples have been here for millennia. Down in Banwari Trace in South Trinidad, they found remains that are something like 3,000 plus years old. And I think they've removed those remains to UE now. I think UE has possession of them. But
as the bones.
Those are the bones, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, 3,000 years precedes the Roman Empire. It's the Greeks, the Romans, all of the empires that we actually do learn about, or we used to learn about in history. So how is it then that there is such a fluster about the first peoples actually being resident here, not being considered indigenous? But nobody would argue that Romans are not indigenous to Rome, or Greeks are not indigenous to Greece, or what have you, even though the first people's presence there matches their civilizations there. I find that very disconcerting. And again, it's all history is told by the victors. So we've been learning the victors' history, and the victors' history is that, these were a bunch of people, they were just transient, coming from the continent, because we're only 7 miles off the coast of South America, Venezuela. And so they were just sort of passing through, and they just happened to, they don't really have any claim to Trinidad. But when you look at their history, you see that there were settlements here. In fact, the only reason that the Spanish were able to get a foothold in Trinidad in 1530, something or the other, 1532, I believe, was that they were granted permission by the cacique up in Santa Cruz in St. Joseph. And that was where, of course, the first capital of Trinidad was. But the Spanish, ever since 1498 when they got here, they were fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. And they just could not get through the first peoples, the indigenous peoples here, because people were adamant. Trinidad was actually considered a sacred island to them. The San Fernando Hill is a sacred space to the Warao peoples, who still come across. They were doing it very regularly up until the early part of the 20th century, 1912 or thereabouts. And all of those things, the Indian Walk, and there are all these trails down in places like Moruga. These are places that they carved out, literally, their feet walking, because those were trails that they made every month or so to come and worship their gods in Naparima and up in El Tecusha and Aripo and those sorts of things. So Trinidad was a very important, not just way station, but settlement for our first peoples. We don't learn that in history, and I think they've only recently started teaching in UE. So if you don't get to UE, then you don't really learn about that aspect of the history at all.
But Cecile, is there literature? Are there books?
Yep.
Yes, that people can access and get these kinds of details?
Yes, Bridget Brereton has books on them. Oh, there is a Dutch gentleman. Oh, his name escapes me at the moment. I quoted him in the podcast I did about Woodbrook a couple of years ago. I had a 10-episode podcast, and the first episode was about Mukurapo. It was called Kumukurapo, the place of the silk cotton trees, and it was apparently a very large First Peoples village stretching all the way down to where Woodford Square is about now. You will recall that they found some bones and remnants of.
It was called. I didn't get the. What was it called?
We don't have the name of the village, but the area was called Kumukurapo.
Kumukurapo, okay.
Kumukurapo, and it was apparently a very large settlement, so much so that they used to hold off the raiding Spanish who came looking for slaves to take down to work on the Spanish main, down Venezuela, etc. So there is a whole history of it here, and there were the monument that was discovered, that was put up to them at the Red House, on the side of the Red House there, because they found bones and artifacts there as well. So there's a whole history that we are not taught that is missing, and it was very telling in that same monument discussion that we had, was it last year or year before, that people were still insisting that, the First Peoples weren't really First Peoples here, and they were all wiped out, and this, that, and the other, and that's not really true. But that's because we've been learning the conqueror's history and not our own.
What can we do about this? What can be done about this situation, Cecile? How can we effect? Because you see, my question is, what will Trinidad and Tobago look like, sound like, feel like in the year 2050? I am looking forward to the year 2050. That's 25 years down the line. As nations go, 25 years is not a long period of time, but in 25-year segments, huge things have happened to every nation.
Yes.
And I am saying, are we going to just meander along? We've just celebrated our 63rd anniversary of independence. We are heading toward our Republic Day celebrations. These are big national things. What thought is being given towards shaping a future that has strong roots in terms of our identity, in terms of the legacies that are resident here? What do you think can be done? Because in a blink, it's going to be 2050.
correct? And given the way technology is leaping forward these days, 2050 is probably going to look vastly different from 2025.
I suspect so.
2025 looks very different from 2010. So, that was only 15 years ago. So it's a little scary. I will preface this whole conversation by saying I am not in any ministry of education or culture or anything like that. I am very much an independent person working on my own, so I do not have access to the big brains and the people who can affect culture and education and so on and so forth, sadly. So I'm like you, I'm muddling along trying to do my best. I think one of the things that we really have to learn to do, and it's one of the things I try to do with the volunteering that I do, is to try to harness technology in a way that we can use to promote our culture and heritage. And by that I mean, you see people like Kyle Boss and Brody and these other folks who have these huge internet followings. They're comedians, they're on TikTok and Instagram and so forth. And they're very, very trendy. The humor, the situations, it is great. It is wonderful. I enjoy watching them. It takes up far too much of my time, so I try to monitor it carefully. As once you go down that rabbit hole, you can scroll all day long.
I am telling you.
But what I believe needs to be done, this thing is a powerhouse. Your little cell phone.
Yes.
That is more power. We have more power in the palm of our hands now than IBM did back in the 1990s. And it just keeps getting more and more powerful. You can now edit videos on your cell phone. You can do podcasts from your cell phone. You can do all kinds of things. And we need to find a way to use this technology and all the other technologies, artificial intelligence, the new types of music and so forth, to create a culture that is truly Trinidadian. From architecture to music to just the way we think about things. Trinidadians do have a very unique way of thinking about things, I must say. But we need to be able to do this so that we are no longer just consumers of the culture. We are creators, because we are a very creative people. I mean, we are the place that Carnival and Pan came from. And we seem, and what is the new music that everybody is very scared about? Trinidad music. Once you start suppressing things or stop giving people outlets, we find ways. Excuse me. And so we need to be able to corral that ingenuity, that sense of expressionism, and put it out there as something that is uniquely Trinidadian. And I think using the technology can help with that, help us do that. And it can also help transform the education system, because I am currently encouraging one of the groups that I work with to have the kids create TikTok videos or whatever the programming is about their environments, about their cultures, about this, what they do for extracurricular activities, be it steel pan, be it moko jumbing, be it whatever, so that they have a sense of investment in their own story. I think the problem is that we don't feel invested in the story of Trinidad. It has been something that has been told to us, and other people came and blah, 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 blah. And we had these African slaves and the indentured Indians and the Chinese and this, and a whole bunch of people came. And that's how we wound up here. And that's it. And we don't feel a sense of connection to all of that.
Yeah. So I would imagine your efforts in your field as expressed in that bit in the podcast that you did about Woodbrook would be an enabler in that direction?
I hope so. I try to bring as much cultural influence to bear in my work, whether it's podcasting or screenwriting or just Toastmaster speeches, as much as possible. Because I think it is vitally important for us as a people. We come from so many places, and we bring so much history and heritage and issues, so many issues with us. But once you get here, you have to start figuring out a way to put all of that together. So we're a fascinating melting pot, or callaloo, whichever you prefer.
A combination of the two.
Yeah. Depending on what it is.
Yeah, especially if at the end of the exercise it have some bun.
Oh yes, the bun is the best thing.
I thought it was me alone.
No. You will get fighting for that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's what I tried to do, and I tried to. The screenplay that I'm working on now is really concerned with how we can use our cultural artifacts and our cultural heritage to battle against the scourges of crime and the other unsavory aspects that society has been breeding over the years. And I have some friends. I have a friend who has a wonderful horror screenplay that is set at carnival time. And it is so unique because of how he uses the carnival characters and what carnival really means, and how the people who come to carnival from foreign but do not embrace it, and thus they see it as a street party as opposed to, just to get drunk and have sex and all that stuff. So they don't really clue into the underlying aspect of the carnival. And because of that, they make a bunch of mistakes that put them in danger. And it's really very interesting to see how he has crafted that.
What's his name?
His name is Brendan, and I have not really asked his permission to inform.
I understand.
So
I understand.
I don't want to give too much away, but I was just really struck by his writing, and these are the kinds of things that I think if we, the government, the country, funds and really gets out there, we can start building an industry, a culture that is steeped in Trinidadianness and can be used to reduce crime, reduce the violence, and also attract some foreign exchange. But it requires an effort to get past the whole oil and gas and the usual low-hanging fruit that we see, and to really sit down and think about, as you said, what we want Trinidad to look like in 2050.
Do you happen to have at hand, Cecile, that speech you did on the Santa Maria in 1498? You have it at hand?
I do.
Could you share that with us? Because I think that will give our listeners and viewers a better grasp of the kind of stuff that we are really talking about. Yes? So I would give you the platform to present that now if you would like.
Oh, you want me
Is
to
that
do the
okay?
whole speech?
Why not? It's 5 minutes long, not so?
Yeah.
It's a Toastmaster speech. It's 5 to 7 minutes long. It's 11:32 now. We have until 12.
Okay. All right. So let's do this then.
All right.
The history books chronicle that one of Columbus's crew, seaman Alonso Perez, spotted the island from its southeasterly extremities. That's where they also allegedly sighted what we now call the Trinity Hills. Now, even before Columbus departed Spain, he had decided that the first land he encountered was to be named for the Holy Trinity. And that's how we got the name Trinidad. On the 30th of May, 1498, Columbus's 6 ships weighed anchor from the southwest of Spain. 3 of those vessels immediately headed to resupply an already established Spanish settlement on the island of Hispaniola, what is now Haiti and Dominican Republic. The other 3 headed further south, seeking to verify the existence of a continent that King John II of Portugal reportedly knew existed, because the Portuguese had found canoes which had set out from the coast of Guinea in West Africa and sailed to the west, carrying merchandise. So, of course, leaving the Cape Verde Islands in June meant that Columbus set sail across the Atlantic at the start of hurricane season. His ships were becalmed for several days in the mid-Atlantic doldrums, where the excessive heat damaged the vessels and seriously threatened their food and water supply. And distressed, the men implored heaven for aid. Their prayers were rewarded by a powerful easterly wind that propelled them westwards to Trinidad. Now, whenever I go into deep country, especially down south, I always try to imagine what this island must have looked like when Columbus and his seafarers arrived on that voyage. What did Senor Perez witness when he gazed out from the crow's nest, his lookout post near the top of the mast? I have never had the opportunity to sail that far off the coast of Trinidad to see what those ancient mariners would have beheld. But one of my life goals is to take a sailing ship around the island and trace Columbus's path from the Atlantic just off Guayacayari, down past Moruga and San Francisco, around the tip of the Icacos Peninsula, through the Serpent's Mouth, and into the southern part of the Gulf of Paria, which is, coincidentally, the most strategically important gulf in the Western Hemisphere, which is why the United States and Venezuela are all having some great fun down there right now. And in the Gulf, you come to rest, bordered by Trinidad to my east, Venezuela to my west. And in 1498, we would have witnessed the well-formed native peoples rhythmically rowing their way out of the Orinoco in Venezuela across to their sacred hill, Nabarima, in what is now San Fernando. And you get to observe their dances, their sacred rituals, their congenial lifestyle. It would have been a rainy season in Trinidad when those ships arrived, and the mountains would have been lush and verdant, interspersed with the vibrant reds of the poinciana and chaconia flowers. Columbus himself said, "We saw houses and people on the spot, and the country round was as beautiful and fresh and green as the gardens of Valencia in the month of March." Valencia is this lovely area in Spain, of course. Trinidad must have been such a welcome sight to those sailors' water-weary eyes. A chance to stand on solid ground and to sip cool, clean, fresh water running free and clear from natural springs, instead of the stagnant sludge that had been resident in a wooden barrel on board for over 2 months. And to hear the cacophony of birdsong again, to chase after a lap or a quench for meat for a hot meal, and to devour fresh fruit instead of rationed slop. Oh, and those 3 ships, they were not the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. Those famous vessels were the ships of Columbus's 1942 voyage, his first. And they were all lost by 1495. The vessels of 1498 were 2 swift little caravels named La Baqueños and El Correo, and the much larger flagship, the Santa Maria de Guia. What a wondrous island we were back then. And 527 years later, we still are. 1498 began a whole new book for this nation, written in blood, sweat, and tears. Myth and legend, race and religion. And I wonder, what will our next chapters read? Master Garth.
Thank you, Cecile. I mean, we have recorded that. Now, with your permission, we will play it again. All right, but I heard it before, and I will hear it again. All right, and I am intrigued by the idea of a sailing trip from Guayari, going down the southern coast and coming into that is the Serpent's Mouth.
Yes,
the Serpent's Mouth is the one at the bottom, right? Yes. And coming up through there and into the Gulf of Paria. That, I went to Mexico. Go ahead.
So I have always, there are a lot of people, again, because the history has been conflated. You will get, I talked to a lot of the native people, their descendants, and they are adamant that many of them, that Columbus's third voyage never happened. Because their argument is that the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria were all gone. So that must have been made up. And that is because everybody just assumes, oh, well, Columbus showed up with 3 ships, so it must be the same 3 ships from the 6 years previous, which it wasn't. So that has caused a whole brouhaha that leads to people saying, well, Columbus's voyage never happened, and the Catholic Church had a whole conspiracy theory and blah, blah, blah. And it became... It's really interesting what happens when the truth or half-truths are put out there. And that is our problem. We don't really know the full story. It's not taught. We're still getting these half-truths and confusing information. So you get a whole lot of people saying, they don't care about history because whatever. And it's not that you want to get stuck in history, because that doesn't help. We are not interested in battling, well, who came off worst, Black people or Indians or the native peoples, because everybody pretty much got beaten up by the European invasion and the system that was put in place afterwards, which we are still struggling with. We are still under a colonial, if not in name, at least in mentality, system of education that does not serve us. Which is why one of the other groups that I am doing some work with, they have documented that throughout the entire Caribbean, our children are failing CXC and exams because the system is really not designed to engage them. So math, English, history, if those who manage to take history, it's a huge failure rate. And it's very concerning for us as a population, not just in Trinidad, but throughout the entire Caribbean.
The Caribbean,
yeah. And so we have the opportunity here in Trinidad to be the, I don't want to say the guinea pigs, but the genesis of a rebirth of a Caribbean aesthetic, I would say, in education, in history, in culture, and in entertainment, and all the other things that are so important.
Well, I think we have touched on some very, very critical issues here. And I had started to say that we really do not appreciate or tell or promote our stuff. Because when I talked about that trip, that sea trip from Guayagüari and so on coming around there. It made me think of an experience I had when I visited Mexico. Now, before we left, I was going on a conference in insurance convention in Mexico that we had back. I would have been in 90s, I think. And the travel agent came and he was telling us about all of the things that we could visit and stuff in Mexico. And one of the things that he spoke very highly about and promoted very vigorously was something called the Floating Gardens of Xochimilco, where runaway slaves used in order to effect an escape. Yes? And how they would go under the water and they would use reeds from in these floating gardens to breathe underwater through these reeds so that they wouldn't be detected. So, I was anxious to see these floating gardens of Xochimilco. Cecile, I will never forget the disappointment that I experienced when I came to the floating gardens of Xochimilco. I've never forgotten the name, Floating Gardens of Xochimilco. You know what was the floating gardens of Xochimilco, Cecile? It was like our dry river, except it wasn't dry, or it had water. And there were these flat bottom boats with mariachis playing their music. And we got into the flat bottom boats and we went down this river with the mariachis playing. All right? And there was nothing to see except weeds and stuff going up in the river. And you know where the trip ended, Cecile? At a flea market.
Yes, so some place to buy stuff, yes, usually.
That was the whole thing. I mean, listen to me, if you had heard how this place had been described and you compare it to the reality, it was just a mind blow. And I said to myself, boy, we have thing in Trinidad and Tobago that far better than this. That we don't talk about at all. We don't promote it. We just do. It's amazing.
Yep.
Absolutely amazing.
We are
the poorer as a result. As a result. Sir Charles, it's 11:45. I don't know if we have anybody who would like to call in and put their 2 cents or 20 cents or dollar into the conversation. Hello? Like Sir Charles in there.
You put Sir Charles to sleep?
I doubt it very much. I think his hand will be tied up with some other stuff. Yeah, but
I've been really talking to quite a few folks. I mean, as I say, I only came back 10 years ago, so I have a lot of information to fill in. But there are people who have been fighting the good fight for decades now. The Artist Coalition of Trinidad and Tobago, Dadan projects. So many people who have been pushing this. Invest in the culture. That whole Chaguaramas Peninsula, there's so much stuff we could be making money out of down there. From the military museum to the church that was there, the monument. Gosh, I was just there yesterday. There's a what you call it? A cemetery with the I forget the lady's name who was buried there. But
where is this?
Right there, down on Tucker Valley Road, on the right side of Tucker Valley Road as you're heading towards Macquarie. Before you get to Bamboo Cathedral and going up the hill, then you have the airport.
Right.
There is
before
so much.
Before where the youth camp used to be.
Yes.
And the shooting range. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. There is so much history, because remember all of that was the base. So you have the planes, you have the satellite tracking station, you have, and these are all things that, yeah, it would cost a bit to refurbish, agreed, but that could easily be a UNESCO heritage site.
Well, I don't know. I have entitled the program, Cecile, Every Cent Counts.
Yes.
And everybody, there's an expectation that the program is going to deal just directly with money matters. But the title goes much further than money. And
mindset.
This is why I say that, I would like to see conversations being generated all across Trinidad and Tobago at every level, because every Trinbagonian has a part to play in moving this country forward to something significant in 2050. And the nice thing about it, as you pointed out, is that it can generate a lot of money. So you see, I'm hitting it at both levels. There's the money level, and there is the question of the investment in something which, to all intents and purposes, has great value. If not priceless, it has great value and can bring and attract great value. So I will appreciate it a lot, Cecile, if you can put me on to the people in your network, people who have knowledge of various aspects of the culture and of the history and so on, because I would certainly like to have them on the program. And I am planning in the near future to have a conversation on the program where we have, because the technology allows for it, that we can have 3 or 4 or 5 people who have different views, but who all have a keen interest in our history and our culture and so on, to exchange ideas and to provoke a discussion and to provide perhaps a kind of a template for this to be repeated all across the country. Like I say, on the block at community centers, at all kinds of sites, down at the beach, I particularly like the river line. All right. But I would really love to see, coming out of our discussion today, I hope that somebody picks up. There is a group, I can't remember their name. I saw them over the weekend on Facebook, that do tours down the islands and that pride themselves on providing views. I think I understand that there's some place called a salt pond somewhere down the islands where you can float, where you can't, it's almost impossible to sink. We've heard tales about the Black Sea, is what sea it is in Europe. There's some sea in Europe that has a very high.
The Dead Sea in Israel.
The Dead Sea. I think the Dead Sea. All right. But apparently we have the equivalent of a Dead Sea here. I never heard about it until I saw this thing on Facebook over the weekend. But
down in Shakari, you have the leper colony, where the leper colony used to be. You could have all sorts of haunted house tours there, because they say that the old hospital there is haunted by the nuns and what have you. So that's a good money-making thing on a Halloween night or something.
Plenty stories. Well, I hope that the capitalists amongst us might see the money-making opportunity and that the culture is promoted as a result. Even if that is not their intent. All right, but there is so much information. So I'm really going to be talking to you again, Cecile, about your work. I would love to have, perhaps, could you give us information on how people can access your podcast? The podcast you did, you said about 7 podcasts on Woodbrook.
It's a 10-part series. It covers from just pre-Columbus to the 1950s. We ran out of money, so we haven't I haven't been able to bring it up to the present day yet. But we live in hope. It's called Growing Up Woodbrook.
Growing Up with Brooke.
Yes.
And how can we get it?
Actually, the easiest way to do it is just Google it. And it's not on Spotify or what is that, Apple, because they have some very specific rules that of how things need to be put up there and whatnot. And it was just a little more drama than I felt like dealing with. But if you go, we did a first couple of them on YouTube. They transpose everything over to YouTube for some reason, but it's on various podcast sites. So if you just Google it and you start with episode 1, Foundation, which tells you about the pre-Columbus and how the native peoples lived here. Each podcast is only between 10 and I think the longest one is maybe 17 minutes. So it's bite-sized. You can listen to it while washing the dishes or whatever. And it's just meant to be a very general overview of what things were like back then. And what I enjoyed about it was that I was able to use local music, local calypsos and sounds and so forth to, really give a full ambience of it.
All right. So Charles, you listening to this? Hello, Sir Charles.
Yes, I am.
He's back.
Like he's still.
Just stepped away momentarily.
Hello?
I said I just stepped away momentarily, but I'm back with you.
Yeah, all right. Well, did you hear what Cecile just said?
No, I missed that.
Her podcast. She has a podcast. Somebody's trying to get me here. I hope I'm going to see.
Yes, it's
Let's see if I can dismiss
a
this.
podcast called Growing Up Woodbrook. It covers from Woodbrook, how Woodbrook came to be, starting back in the just pre-Columbus up to the 1950s, just after World War II.
Okay, so it's a series of them you got.
Yeah, they're on YouTube and a couple of the other podcast sites. They're not on Spotify and they're not on Apple. But you can, the easiest thing to do is just type in Growing Up Woodbrook. It's based on a book that came out in 2022. That was done by the Woodbrook Residents Committee, of which I'm a part. And the last chapter of that book is also about Woodbrook in the future. So futuristic Woodbrook. What kinds of things can we do to promote heritage and culture in Woodbrook as well? Because, we had so many great mass bands here, George Bailey and Stephen Leung and all those folks. We had, of course, we started off as a First Peoples village, and then it became a plantation. So 2 of the squares were involved. Sigurd Square on Rosalino Street, that used to be where the I think the mill was, and then the sugar factory, and then the big playground, Augustus Williams Park, where the old fire station was and the old tax office was. That was the overseer's office for the plantation. And then Adam Smith Square itself was apparently a fallout shelter for World War II. They used to have trenches in there, so if bombs started falling, people would be able to go and run into the trenches and hide. Again, these are all things that we discovered. There's no record of this anymore. So it's
amazing history. Amazing
walls that we set up around all of these things. And then you had people like all these, the more unsavory aspects of Woodbrook, because of course you had the American base down on Dockside and all the ladies of ill repute who used to hang out with them and the fights that used to occur there, and
some things don't change.
Yeah, people gonna people, as they say.
Yeah.
So much history here, and it is just it's a fascinating country to live in. We just need to curate it a heck of a lot better.
Amen to that. Cecile, let me thank you for your time and for the tremendous and rich information that you passed on. I don't think we have any more time to take some calls from our listeners, but people, I hope that you all have paid attention. Growing up Woodbrook, Google growing up Woodbrook, and you will be you will come across a feast. All right, you will do yourself a favor in coming across an absolute feast upon the history of Woodbrook. And in the same way that we have the history of Woodbrook, we also have Cecile can also direct us into where we can find really lovely and rich accounts and information that speaks to our roots and that we will be enriched by engaging. So again, thank you a whole lot, Cecile, and we will speak again. We will speak again. All right.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to chatting with you guys some more.
Okay, well, it's Net Radio TT,
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Net TT Radio, sorry. So, Sir Charles, I think we are just about at the end of our time. I know you have the news coming up. So people can contact me at 680-3185. 680-3185. And that's a WhatsApp contact. Don't call me, WhatsApp me. Give me your name, give me an email address, and we can converse. And I pray that those who have listened, people here in Trinidad, people out there, Trinis out there in the diaspora, let us get these conversations going, because 2050 ain't far, and we need to be miles ahead of where we are now. And we need to utilize the technology that is available to us to move us in that direction. Sir Charles.
All right, thank you very much, guys, and thank you very much to your guest passing through. This has been on The Inside with Garth Thomas. Every cent counts. I'm putting him in the wrong place now. All right, so stay with us. Stay with us. We have news that is straight ahead.
All right.